Hi class, today we're going to cover something called the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is a measure of the average change in prices over time in a fixed market basket of goods and services. We say, in the United States, that there are two CPIs that we can calculate. One is called a posh CPI, and one is called a L'Esper's CPI. The posh CPI, P-A-A-S-C-H-E, is named after Mr. Posh, and it's an index in which quantities from the current time period are used. The L'Esper's index, named after Mr. L'Esper's, is an index in which the quantities from the base time period are used. So in the posh index, we ask ourselves the question, what would it cost to purchase today's market basket at today's prices compared to today's market basket at yesterday's prices? In the L'Esper's index, we ask, what does it cost to purchase yesterday's market basket at today's prices compared to yesterday's market basket at yesterday's prices? Now, in the United States, we use the L'Esper's index, and can you think of any reason why? Well, think of this new thing called a hoverboard. Hoverboards didn't exist 10 years ago, so if we tried to use a posh index in which quantities from today at yesterday's prices are used to calculate the index, we have no yesterday's prices for the hoverboard. So the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, is a L'Esper's index. So let's talk a little bit about where the CPI comes from. Sorry about that. When we're talking about a L'Esper's index. The CPI is really taking the sum from I equals 1 to n number of goods, today's prices for each good, yesterday's quantity for each good, and putting it over the sum from I equals 1 to n of yesterday's prices for each good and multiplying each price for each good by the quantities in yesterday's market basket. So what we really have here is yesterday's, or the base period, quantities, and there could be a lot of them, I equals 1 to n, and comparing the price of those quantities today compared to the price of those quantities yesterday. Now what does this I equals 1 to n mean? Let's say n equaled 4. We could have expenditures on food, housing, medical care, and maybe energy. So if we were to take the top of the equation, we would say, what was the price today in time period 1 of food, and multiply it by the quantities I bought yesterday of food, and add that to the price in time period 1 of housing multiplied by my base period of housing, and add to that my price in time period 1 of medical care multiplied by the quantity of medical care in time period 0, and lastly add the price in time period 1 of energy multiplied by the quantity in the base period of energy. And I would put that over the price in time period 0 of food multiplied by the base quantity of food plus the price in time period 0 of housing multiplied by the base period of housing plus the price in the base period of medical care multiplied by the base quantity of medical care and the price in the base time of energy multiplied by the quantity in the baseline of energy. And all this big addition of expenditures is shorthanded by saying the sum of each of the prices and quantities together to add up to, in this case, 4. So before we do that anymore, let's go on to the next slide, which shows you that the Bureau of Labor Statistics can provide a whole host of data on a whole host of things, including consumer prices. So here's an example of consumer prices, looking at all goods and services through time. I asked, in this case, for all goods. This is the whole CPI, and we can see that over time, the price of goods tends to increase, although there are fluctuations going up and down in individual time periods. So where does this 102 come from? Well, this 102 required to know all of the prices in time period 1 and the quantities purchased in time period 1, which was the year 2000, and put it over all the quantities and prices of time period 0 for the same market basket in 1999. So this 102 was really the sum of today's prices and yesterday's market basket and yesterday's prices at yesterday's market basket. We can look at another CPI, which is food and beverages, and we can see that the prices overall over time of food and beverages increase, and we can again, sorry about that folks, get a CPI over time for food and beverages. We can look at another thing, and that would be medical services, and I can ask for these series for a whole host of goods. In fact, there's 40 goods and services in the CPI market basket, again increasing with a corresponding CPI for every year. Now here's energy. Energy's done very different things. It seems to be very volatile over time. We see a huge drop in 2009, and once again we saw a huge drop from 2014 to 2015. Those huge drops, you can expect to see a change in the CPI from a year to year, where in 2008 the CPI was actually bigger than in 2009. So what does all this really mean for you, the consumer? The CPI helps you to measure inflation, or inflation, we really mean increases in prices over time. How would you calculate the rate of inflation? You take the CPI in one time period over the CPI in a base period. So let's do an example to see whether or not we can figure that out. Now we know that to get the CPI in a particular time period, we have to calculate yesterday's market basket at today's prices compared to yesterday's market basket at yesterday's prices. So let's say I have two goods. I have food and I have all other goods. And the price of food in time period 0 was $1.50, and the price of food in time period 1 was $2. The price of other goods in time period 0 was $2.50, and the price of other goods in time period 1 was $3. I'm still not done because I need quantities. Well, the quantity of food in the base period, let's just say, was 2, and we know that because we have a L'Esper's index, the other thing that we do is always use the base period for the quantities, so that's going to equal 2. And we know that in the base period, the quantity of other goods, let's just say, was 6, so the quantity in the new period is also going to be 6. So we're on our way to calculating a rate of inflation. So remember what we do. We take the sum from I equals 1. In this case, we have two goods. The price in time period 1 of each good times the quantity in time period 0 of each good over I equals 1 to 2 goods, the price in time period 0 of each good, and the quantity in time period 0 of each good. So how do I do that? I say, well, in time period 1, the price of food was $2 and the quantity of food was 2, plus the price of other goods was $3 and the quantity was 6. In the base period, the price of food was $1.50 and the quantity was 2, and the price of other goods was $2.50 and the quantity was 6. So I have 4 plus 18 over 3 plus 13, which is equal to 22 over 16, which is equal to 1.22. Is this the rate of inflation? No, this is simply the CPI in time period 1, or the top part of this equation. So I really need a CPI from time period 0. Well, let's just say we use the base year, and we're going to say that the CPI was 1.00, and this was 1.22. So if I take 1.22 divided by 1.00, I'm going to get an inflation rate of 22% between the two time periods.